Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Father Joseph Swaden, and we are doing a live episode today. We were going to start with originally we were going to start with the Lorenzo Scupoli question that Jason Allen, who, by the way, just generously donated today, and pointed out that yes, he wrote the skeleton of an amazing book. Saint Nicodemus did work over it very well, and we're gonna have a lot of discussion about that. But again, this is a live Q&A. I'm just going to put the link in the chat if you don't mind, so anybody can join, and then I will add that to you in the section if I can. I wonder if I can pin from here. No, I cannot. Still, okay. So let's see here, and if I can, one moment, getting started. Evening, everyone. I'm just going to put that in the chat real quick, and then from there, I'm going to go to pinning this, so anybody can jump on and usually people are pretty good about it when I do these. So this is what I wanted to touch on first because it's in the news and it is relevant to us. It's as Orthodox Christians. It's when we talk about the Holy Land, obviously, I realize that it's a bit controversial. Well, it's not. It's violence. It's just violence. Okay, so let's. I'm just going to share the latest um, from Breitbart, which is doing live updates. So let me see if they've got anything new. Okay, so here, okay, let me see here. So I'm just going to read for those who aren't aware of it. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has launched unprecedented terror attack on Israel. Launched an unprecedented terror attack on Israel, which has included the firing of thousands of rockets onto the Israel. Wow. Okay, this is just bad grammar. And the infiltration of Israeli territory by land, air, and sea. Responding to the surprise attack, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared the nation is at war and that the terrorists will pay a price, quote, pay a price that it has never known before. Thus far, the attacks in Israel have reportedly left 300 people dead and nearly 1,600 wounded. Hamas claims that it has captured Israeli Defense Force soldiers and civilians during its assault on Israeli border towns outside Gaza. Israel's military response, Operation Sword of Iron, has led to the deaths of 198 Palestinians and 1,610 people injured. The attack occurred on the Jewish holiday of Shemini Atzeret, or the final day of the annual High Holy cycle. It is, let me see here. CNN has authenticated the video. Most of this is just as of 8 p.m., so about 17 minutes ago. CNN has authenticated the video of a woman who appears to have sustained bodily injuries being dragged out of a jeep and placed into the back by armed militants. The BBC reports the footage was filmed near the Gaza city of Shejia, or Shejia. I don't actually know how to pronounce that. This is it's kind of a big deal. Um, anyone who is following in the Discord knows that I was talking quite a bit about this. This is a very successful attack by Hamas. It changes the game really. If Israel does not just if they do what they say they're gonna do, then we'll see because basically Netanyahu's come out and basically said he's just gonna level Gaza. I don't know how well that's gonna work out. But in any case, there's a lot of debates going on right now about this. People are asking, well, what's the proper position that we should take? Well, obviously, we're against violence. That's the first thing. Muslims are not traditionally very well, they're not great dealing with Christians. Israel itself has not been great dealing with Christians. It has its own poor track record. Ideally, I would think that like maybe carving out a Christian protectorate in the Holy Land wouldn't be a terrible idea. But I don't know. And we don't. I mean, we have a dog in this fight as there are Orthodox Christians in that area. Unfortunately, but it's going to be there's not really a place where I can take a side. I don't see a winning side here. That said, it is important to remember that most of the prophecies of the end times involve the rebuilding of the building of the third temple, which is something that a lot of people in Israel are very big about. They have the Temple Institute. They've got the whole thing with the red heifers, so on and so forth. Ultimately, those rebuilding the temple will lead to, according to the fathers, will lead to the Antichrist, who will preach from the third temple. So things that keep that from happening are not necessarily a bad thing. Now, granted, and if anyone wants to disagree or tell me I'm nuts, fine, please go right ahead. And feel free to use the link in the chat and call in. But yeah, so there's a lot going on with this. This affects not just, I mean, it affects the destiny of Earth effectively. So yeah, and to that end, it is a very important thing to talk about. I don't know if anyone has any opinions on it, etc. And if not, I understand. And then, after going through some of this, we're going to talk about Lorenzo Scupoli's book, and it's an interesting thing. Vladika Enoch has actually sent me information from a website that's very, very detailed in terms of the amount of information that they have about unseen warfare and its different versions. So we're going to be talking about that. But for now, I'm just following the live news, and I'm shocked by the number of opinions. And I'm also shocked by the number of people that are trying to take sides on this. And I mean, I have no dog in this fight. I have no idea what is going to happen. But this is kind of like it's kind of crazy. I've never seen anything like it. This is the largest terror attack that's been had in Israel in 50 years. The bigger and more impressive thing about it, frankly, is that it's they actually Hamas actually was able to uh, effectively override the Iron Dome system, which is a defense system against rocket attacks from outside Israel, and they were able to overwhelm it. So it is, quite a surprise. Now it's getting crazy. It turns out that they're saying now that in Afghanistan, the Taliban is asking for Islamic countries for safe passage so that they can literally go to war as well. Hezbollah jumped in and has noted that they'll attack Israel from the north. I've just never seen anything like this. More importantly, I've never seen anything like this that was actually, for lack of a better word, a successful military response from any Palestinian group. Usually, they have various responses, but usually they fail. This did not. So no idea where this is going to go. No idea what does this mean for the properties of the church? What does this mean for the interests of the church? No one's even asking that question yet. It seems to be that it's like, okay, well, it's either going to be they're talking in a binary where it's going to be Israel versus Palestine, Jew versus Muslim, and meanwhile, a lot of those areas and a lot of those properties and people are Christians, and many of them have a voice in this too. So what's going to happen next is going to be of interest. We're going to see just how crazy it's going to get. But in any case, uh, that's basically the news as of this morning. So it's pretty big. It does affect us because of the fact that we are, we're a church that started in Jerusalem. That land has value and importance to us as well. So this is why we're following the story without necessarily taking a side. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to leave that for now. If people want to talk about it, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can put it in the chat. You can also reach out. If you want to directly go through, we have a link to the StreamYard. All you have to do is click it, and you can join the stream, and we'll have some ideas. Let's see here. Okay, Jason Allen, right? Have you heard of the idea theory that Ukraine will be the place to where Jews will migrate, that they will give up Israel? Now, it's interesting that you say that because I basically I hold that that's kind of the public perception. For people who don't know what he's talking about a project called the Heavenly Jerusalem Project. Let me see if I can find some information on that. Because Um, that in particular, this particular project. Hold on, let me see here. I'm trying to see if I can find it, but basically, there was a researcher on Twitter who pointed out that there were a number of videos being issued by a Russian oligarch, billionaire oligarch, and talking about creating a new land in the area where the Ukraine war is being fought right now. These videos are a few years old. This is not like it's not concurrent with what's happening. So it's either a coincidental or b part of a longer term strategy. Um, and what that's about was the idea was to take the historical land of Hazaria, which was a kingdom, a Jewish kingdom that existed in the area, in the Ukrainian area, that eventually was taken over and absorbed by Russia. But the point is that the idea, according to the videos, and we're just going to assume that they're serious in their advertising, was that it was supposed to be a second Israel. So you could have like Israel and Israel, and you have Hazaria, so it'd be two different Jewish countries. There's one problem with that theory, and it's no less the person than Henry Kissinger of the globalists, the globalist fame, actually said Israel would cease to exist, and I think he said it in 2005, as in 10 years. Reader John says, "Father bless, may God bless you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit." And but the whole point was, he was saying in 10 years Israel won't exist, and what he was referring to was the demographics of Israel. The simple reality is the Palestinians have higher birth rates than the Israelis. It would be a matter of time, and we're actually at the point where they're just about at parity, um, where they would overtake the Israeli population just based on size. Now, keep this in mind, and this is why I say this. A lot of the times when people present their claims, like these people with the heavenly Jerusalem kind of cult thing that they're going, I'm just checking here to see if I can find it. But the heavenly Jerusalem thing, based in historic Hazaria, um, what that says is this: is that to me, and this is the way I read it, they know about the Henry Kissinger thing. They know about the globalist, kind of predictions that the Palestinians will overtake the area just based on pure size. And so what they're doing is um, they're actually going to they. It sounds like what they were trying to do was they're claiming that they wanted to create two Israels. In reality, what it sounds like is that it's a backdoor. It's a plan B, and we already know because we're seeing it in Ukraine now. Um, we're seeing the kind of the big celebrations that they're having in these territories that have been flattened out by the war. Um, People are coming from Israel and doing massive pilgrimages to this exact area. I mean, it's could be a coincidence, maybe, but I don't think it is. Let me see here. Jason said, I remember when Kissinger said that. Yes. Is it true that they have a right of return to Ukraine like Israel? Not to my knowledge. I don't think they do, and I don't think that's current Ukrainian law. So they're basically admitting that they are Khazars then, and not Israelites. Um, it comes to that question. It's called historical memory. Ultimately, um, it would be like they could probably do a war like this in Spain as well, and then take a big chunk out of it, and then But the point is that it does jive in their history. Um, it's a nice area, quite frankly. It's they point out that they want the coastline, which has a lot of beaches. And basically, the guy I'm still looking for that heavenly Jerusalem thing. I want to find that because it would be kind of helpful. Let me just see here. What about because now apparently what used to be kind of obscure knowledge is all over the place. So there's like hundreds of memes now. Um, Let me see here. And yeah, okay, is that no? There's a lot of like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Useless, useless tweets that have kind of taken over the whole thing, and I'm trying to see if I can find something. Yeah, okay, this is all recent. Let me see if I hit people. What it does, it probably won't pull up anything. Um, let me see here. All right. So anyway, and then let me open up my to my Discord here. And so yeah, there is that issue that I'm still looking for it on Twitter. I, that their search is not working the way it used to. Heavenly Jerusalem Project, maybe. Oh, there's a hashtag now. Let me see if that helps. Yeah. Okay, so let me put this guy. This guy wrote last year. And I'm going to share that. Give me a moment. Share here. Okay. So this guy has been kind of following this. This was written in April of last year, and he basically was talking about this thing called the Heavenly Jerusalem Project. As you can see, this is Igor Gecko or Igor Berkut was announcing the movement of Zionism to Ukraine called Hazaria Rising. As you can recognize, it's kind of like an Israeli flag with a little thingy in the middle, and those are the Ukrainian colors. Um, it's he has his opinions of him. Yep, probably he is kind of demonic. I mean, he looks at some weird stuff, and for some reason, all his videos, and I don't know how to find these videos because I believe they're on the contact and other socials, or I don't know what the rest of that is. But in any case, yeah, that's for some reason he has models with tattoos that say Heavenly Jerusalem on the side. So I mean, he seems quite serious. There's another tattooed model um, about this sort of thing. It's really weird, but he's really, really, really rich. And this is what people are trying to figure out. This is angry comments from Russians, and basically the response is, "Oh well." Um, so this is kind of crazy. It sounds crazy, but now keep in mind this was a year ago. This was a year ago in April, so it was more like a year and a half ago. The idea here is that what he's advertising is basically that this would be like a second Israel kind of place. But ultimately, the globalists already figured out there might not be a first one. So if there's not a first one, then where would they go? Well, now you have an answer. They go right into that spot in Ukraine. People are doing it, so it's not like this. Eventually, it stops being conspiracy theory. I usually stop the conspiracy theory once I see a billionaire behind it. I'm like, oh, that's not conspiracy theory anymore. That's advertising. So that's kind of playing out what they were actually kind of seriously planning. Again, anyone can call in, make comments. We welcome them, and you can just use the link in blue at the top of the chat to join the stream if you like. So yeah, I hope that that helps. On that subject, if anyone has any more questions or wants to go back to it, let me know. But now, Jason Allen, as I mentioned, had generously donated for an answer on the question of who is Lorenzo Scupoli. And as we go through that, I found Bishop Enoch sent me a site which gives a good deal of biographical information as well as some history on the book and how it was treated by the fathers in question. Father Boniface, let me see here. Father Matthew Raphael Johnson has done a lot of work on this subject. Uh, wasn't aware of it actually, but that is interesting that he did. Do you think there's any room for the idea that the Jews would like to occupy a territory which is a strong base of hierarchy and replace it with their own kind of rule? Um, I I don't know. I never really thought about it until recently, I guess. I don't know that, I would say that the Zionists do. I don't know, once again, we got to be specific. Um, and so, yeah, it's possible. I think with the Zionists, that's so kind of already happening. Um, and let me see here. All right, so I'm going to put this up so we can get to the Lorenzo Scupoli question. And I'm probably not going to intersperse with other questions until I'm done. And then we'll get back to just basic questions and answers. Give me just a moment while I pull that up. Okay. So this is from Aspika.ru. I don't know who's familiar with it, but basically, it's probably the largest kind of article and information. And I'm also going to share a link here on the question of spiritual combat and unseen warfare. And I'm going to go through the biographical section piece by piece. And then we're going to actually do this. Actually, this article is fantastic. It's by Hieromonk Theakist Igoumenov, and basically it covers the biographical information about Lorenzo Scupoli, and also how spiritual combat turned into unseen warfare, not just with Saint Nicodemus, but also with Saint Theophan the Recluse. And they actually created two completely different versions of it that were they're fully overrides. But to answer questions directly about Lorenzo Scupoli, he was a Roman Catholic priest. I'm gonna read some of this because it has a little bit of his biographical information. So it says, little is known about the life of the author of Combattimento Spiritual. The most complete biography of him was found in the introductory article to the recently republished first edition of Combattimento Spiritual, CS. And in this article, the article by Professor H.A. Hodges, which preceded the English translation of The Invisible Warfare published in the mid 20th century. Lorenzo Scupoli was born in 1529 in the Italian city of Otranto into a noble family. At baptism, he was named Francis. No information has been preserved about the first 40 years of his life. On June 4th, 1569, at the age of 39, Scupoli was admitted to the Theatine Order. This is a priestly order founded by Cajetan of Siena in 1524. Officially, the members of the order were called Theatines, since its first head was Bishop Carafa of Theatina. The main tasks of the order were the fight against heresies by peaceful means, preaching and spiritual education, as well as nursing. The missionary activity of the Theatines extended to almost all of Europe and later to America, Persia, and the Caucasus. The Theatine order arose from a community of priests which was widely known in Italy under the name of the Oratory of Divine Love. Cajetan of Thiene founded this order for priests who did not take traditional monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The monks who joined the order did not leave the world, but continued to fulfill the duties of parish priests. The Theatine order is known for its strict ascetic ideals, and members of the order were guided in their lives by the ladder of St. John Climacus. Scupoli took his first steps in monastic life under the guidance of Andre Avellino. On January 25th, 1571 in Naples, he took his final monastic vows with the name Lorenzo. In 1574, on Christmas Day, he was ordained a presbyter. And in 1578, he was transferred to Milan, and then in 1581 to Genoa, where a terrible epidemic raged, during which he devoted himself to caring for the sick. 1585 marked the beginning of a difficult and humiliating period in the life of Lorenzo Scupoli. He was accused of serious misconduct. The general chapter of the Theatines, meeting in Venice in the course of the process brought against him, sentenced Scupoli to 1 year in prison, a ban on the priesthood, and a ban on conducting spiritual activities. It is not known what charges were brought against him, nor who the accuser was, but Scupoli did not defend himself. According to the custom of that era, the documents of the trial were immediately set on fire. Many authors who have studied the Scupoli case believe that his conviction was the fruit of slander. Perhaps Scupoli's crime concerned the integrity of the faith, quote unquote. In other words, he was accused of heresy. During the trial, Scupoli showed such great humility and obedience that even despite all the humiliations, he gained the reputation of a man of the highest virtues. He responded to all accusations with silence. And although a lot of people were interceding for him, he did not make any efforts to alleviate his lot. According to the testimony of the brothers who lived in the same house with Scupoli, he showed an invariable readiness to perform any simple and most difficult work, loved solitude and silence, and devoted many hours to prayer. He edified his brother with his own calmness and humility. In May 1588, Scupoli left Genoa and headed for Venice. While the trial was going on, he wrote the book called Combattimento Spirituale, or Spiritual Warfare. Only the following year, 1589, the first edition of CS was published in Venice, which was anonymous. Only much later, late in the year of Scupoli's death, was the book published under the author's name. Scupoli remained in Venice for 10 years. In 1598, after a 24-year absence, he returned to Naples, where he spent the last years of his life in community with his spiritual mentor, Andrea Avellino. Shortly before the death of Lorenzo Scupoli, he was completely rehabilitated, restored to the priesthood, and received the right to perform divine offices. He died in Naples on November 28th, 1610. So, as we can see from the life of, there's a few things we can gather from his own life, and also some of the confusion that would pop up later. And the article does cover this in great detail. It is often assumed that that the kind of the book Spiritual Warfare is identical to the book that Saint Theophan wrote, the book that Saint Nicodemus wrote, and this is actually not correct. What they kind of did, and I'm going to go into those sources for a little bit. They kind of saw the book, and as you can see, until his death, there were editions being published of it that were anonymous. So the point is, it wasn't until after his death that his name was actually revealed. What ended up happening was that they saw in the book a very good skeletal structure. However, they built on it substantially. And what's interesting is that they built on both Saint Nicodemus and Saint Theophan. Both actually build out on it completely differently and from completely different angles. They come to the same conclusions. Obviously, they're Orthodox and they all use the Holy Fathers. But that is basically what they saw as they saw what was very useful in this book and decided that they were going to redo it. It's often been suggested that, and usually by humanists, that St. Theophan hid the fact that it was a Roman Catholic author. However, this article does provide sufficient evidence that one can safely assume that St. Theophan might not have even been aware of it. He actually worked off of a Latin version, off of a Greek version that had been translated from the Latin. This is in the text. I'm going to go into a little bit into it just so you can have an understanding of just how different these texts really are. Just as a quick note, what I'm going to say here is we're going to read this part because it's important. CS was not originally written for publication. Lorenzo Scupoli published it at the insistence of his friend who read the manuscript. As already mentioned, the first edition of CS was published in 1589 and it was anonymous. This edition was short and contained only 24 chapters. With each subsequent reprint, the book expanded, and by 1599 it had reached its current length, 66 chapters. In 1610, the book received an addition of 37 chapters. The edition is a complete independent work, just like CS, dedicated to the moral improvement of a Christian, but of course does not reveal the issue with the same completeness. In addition, Lorenzo Scupoli wrote the book Sentiero del Paradiso, a book consisting of 15 chapters. This book is often published under the same cover as CS. The most widespread and authoritative text, consisting of 66 chapters, was published in a Roman edition by the Theatine Carlo de Palma based on the previous editions and manuscripts of Scupoli. The first anonymous edition of CS caused controversy about authorship. The expanded version of 1599 was no longer anonymous. Scupoli signed it, Lorenzo Scupoli CR. Disputes about the authorship of the book continued to exist for a long time among those who had not seen this edition, especially outside the borders of Italy. But ultimately, thanks to this first signed edition, Scupoli's authorship was recognized by everyone. The first of 24 chapters. Hold on one second. Let me see here. How is my audio doing? If anyone, I just switched it over to. I didn't realize it wasn't on Blue Snowball, and I'm a little concerned. Was my audio that off, or is it better now? Just if somebody could just let me know, because I literally thought I was on the Blue Snowball, and now I realize that I was not. Okay, it's better. I'm gonna have to. I feel like I should reread this, but I might do that non-live. But in any case, what I had been saying was that the the text had so many editions that were anonymous that even all the way after Scupoli's death, there was considerable controversy over who was the actual author. So this is something to keep in mind, that even many texts that reprinted, etc. Thank you. Okay, that's good to know. I'm now wondering if I should read. I'm probably going to have to redo a few of these things. But in any case, the text itself, as I mentioned, in many editions was anonymous. And so even though the article seems to go into some depth as to which one was used, because here it's Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain published this book, called Unseen Warfare, and so the Reverend, it says here, Leonti Kozlov, the assumptions made that the Nicodemus translated the book from the original language. This was actually, there's no good evidence for this. However, the recent discoveries of the philologist Emmanuel Franciscos have recently clarified the origin of St. Nicodemus and his relations with the Western world. In the old catalogs of the Patmos Library, the scientists discovered a mention of 2 books by the same name by St. Nicodemus manuscripts, which disappeared in later copies. They are Spiritual Exercises and Spiritual Warfare, and are mentioned in the catalogs of 1769 and 1793, respectively. The books are no longer in the catalogs of 1814. Being list of relevant books by St. Nicodemus, they could not, both in time and in the description of the catalogs, but be prototypes of the publications. Following this, as a result of searches in the library, E. Franciscos found the lost manuscript, which was at some point rebound and mistakenly cataloged under the title of one of its chapters. This manuscript, as established of a study by the handwriting, belonged to the pen of an 18th century scribe, Emmanuel Romanides. He was from Crete, had an excellent command of Italian and ancient Greek, and in the first half of the 18th century, for 40 years, served as the secretary of the city community, Patmos. In addition to his social activities, he was engaged in translation activities almost exclusively from Italian into vernacular Greek. 10 of his 11 surviving manuscripts are for translations of works by Catholic authors. Ultimately, what he had done is he had translated Combattimento Spiritual, and it's that Greek version that St. Nicodemus used. Now, St. Nicodemus was a very big, he liked the book a lot, but he saw it was largely incomplete. And so when we start looking at St. Nicodemus's version, and keep in mind that St. Nicodemus's version is not the same as St. Theophan's, which is the one that's published by Jordanville. So we're talking about 2 different books, but the same process basically occurs with both of them. So in this case, of the 81 chapters of the original, 2 were omitted. The rest were translated essentially as Scupoli wrote them. However, the total volume of work has almost doubled due to the addition of a preface and a significant number of notes. Some changes were made to the text itself. So St. Nicodemus basically divides the book into parts. He distributes them. Instead of 66 and 15, he turns it to 53 and 27. He omits chapter 61 due to its obvious similarity with chapter 15, and from the short 8th chapter of the second, he uses only parts of the first half, inserting it into the similar 3rd chapter. He also omits the title of the second part, the only place in the manuscript where the translator mentions the name of the author, part 2 of the spiritual works of Father Lorenzo Scupoli, the author of Spiritual Warfare. The comparative number of the chapters Combattimento Spiritual and the Greek version are given in Table A1. This, as I said, this is really it's exhaustive. It goes through everything. According to the calculations of Constantine Papoulides, St. Nicodemus refers to the Old Testament 36 times. And he goes through each of those books. 10, then it goes through the 50 times to the New Testament, and it goes through the relevant books. Then it goes to 109 times to patristic works, including 18 quotes from St. Isaac the Syrian, Basil the Great, Gregory Palamas, St. John Chrysostom, Maximus the Confessor, St. Theophilus of Bulgaria. He adds a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of more saints and fathers that he uses to back up the ideas or properly even comport them in an orthodox way. And this is partially, he did change things. For example, he removed any mention of purgatory, any mention of the cult of the Sacred Heart. He replaces images with icons. So he's very careful um, in examining it. He's like literally going line by line through it. And really, honestly, nobody could be better than the compiler of the rudder to do something like this. So this is just the changes in Saint Nicodemus's version, which I'm not sure if it's even been published in English. So he changes quite a lot of things, even meanings. For example, spiritual communion. Both he and Saint Theophan talk about communion with God and prayer, but that's not what Lorenzo Scupoli originally meant, because spiritual communion in Roman Catholicism is an active prayer that you do when you can't receive communion. It's a way of kind of doing your own spiritual communion. So it's definitely not the same thing. As we go further, we can see here that he takes out certain things. He edits this incredibly heavily. And then, of course, there's a new chapter that Scupoli does not have on the correction of imagination and memory. So this is an interesting addition that he puts in, and he goes through explaining it. As I mentioned, there is a link, which I will be including in the description, to this article. It is huge. It is big. He goes through virtually every chapter, the problem of meditation, so on and so forth. And so this continues on, and he really goes through it. Now, keep in mind, that's just the St. Nicodemus part. He then goes through the Russian edition, which came from a translation of the Latins. Now, keep in mind, this is where there's more confusing stuff, and I got to go back here because few people realize how St. Theophan's work came into existence. And I do have to mention that. So basically, the first Russian translation of CS, in which the original title was preserved, was published in 1787. The title page reads Spiritual Warfare or the Science of Perfect Victory of Oneself. The book was translated into Russian by Ivan Samilovich Andreevsky. Now, Andreevsky was a doctor of medicine, a professor of Moscow University. He was born in the Chernigov province, where his father was a priest, and he died in Moscow in November of 1809. So this was the first translation of this text, and it was pretty accurate, and he does go under the direction of his spiritual fathers and the bishops. So he did do that translation. So he was a very hardworking professor and doctor. And then this is interesting. In 1793, he submitted a petition for the Synod for permission to publish Spiritual Warfare at his own expense. However, immediately after its release, the book was confiscated. Nevertheless, in 1794, a book entitled The Feet of a Christian Against Temptations appeared in Moscow, after the editing of Archimandrite Methodius Smirnov of Novospassky Monastery. He removed some, quote, dark passages and instead chose decent discussions from the ideas of the Holy Fathers. Spiritual Warfare in Andreevsky's translation was published by A. Mosen in 1996 in the Parisian magazine of Slavic culture, Symbol. It was published as a separate book in 2009 by the St. Petersburg publishing house ABC Classics. In 1816, Scupoli's book was published for the third time. Now, this is the Freemason one. The translation was made from French by the famous Freemason Alexander Fedorovich Labzin, who hid under the pseudonym UM, that is, Disciple of Wisdom. About his translation, he writes, "We are publishing this translation from the French. The Jesuit John Brignon, who translated this book from the Italian language by Don Lorenzo Scupoli. In Italian, the writer directs his instructions to a real or fictitious person whom he calls his beloved daughter in Jesus Christ. In the Russian translation, it is put instead of daughter, dear son. We, following the French translator, Father Brignon, we stress his instructions to all those who read the book, thinking like him it will be more fitting for the purpose of the book. But the fate of this translation was also not successful, and it did not gain distribution. Subsequently, the book was forgotten until the release of the translation of Invisible Warfare by St. Theophan the Recluse in 1885. I'm not going to go through the life of St. Theophan because it's really well known and because we all know who he is. But he began translating originally from the Greek. And when the translation was almost completed, he looked at the book. He learned that the book was of Western origin. So he began to boldly rework the Greek text and publish his own edition. And so he was remembering an earlier translation that he had seen, But then he goes even further than Saint Nicodemus does. So this is an even more different text than Scopoli's original and Saint Nicodemus's version. In this particular case, we've got the Old Testament referenced 36 times, over 50 times to the New Testament, 109 times, a whole bunch more changes, a whole lot of saints. He changes things like purgatory, the Sacred Heart. Well, that's St. Nicodemus's one. Sorry, hold on. That was my mistake. The Russian one increases by St. Theophan more than double. It's 221 references, 110 references to the Old Testament, 111 to the New, versus 86 in St. Nicodemus. The number of references to the patristic literature, by contrary, is reduced. So there's references to St. Basil the Great, John Climacus, Ezekiel of Jerusalem, Gregory of Sinai, John Chrysostom, Maximus the Confessor, Saints Barsanufius and John, Saints Ignatius and Callistus Anthopoulos, St. Peter of Damascus, Blessed Theodoret, Blessed Augustine, Job from the Library of St. Photius, Theodote, Great St. Gregory the Theologian, St. John Cassian. So he's got a whole bunch of more fathers. He's got less fathers than St. Nicodemus, but more scriptures, but he still has a lot of fathers. The point is, if St. Nicodemus, as stated above, leaves some Catholic expressions in his work, then St. Theophan approaches this issue more carefully and leaves no room for them. He omits all expressions saved by Father Nicodemus, St. Nicodemus, which includes sufficient grace instead of satisfaction for sins. St. Theophan writes about cleansing through repentance, removes mention of the merits of Christ and his saints, removes all but one St. Augustine quotation from the Latin Fathers. The following chapters are completely rewritten: 13, 14, 37, 27, 32, and 34. He goes through a whole bunch of changes on prayer, spiritual communion, as I mentioned earlier. So ultimately, what we know about Lorenzo Scupoli is pretty straightforward. No one really knows much about his childhood. We do know his life as a Theatine, and we do know, kind of what happened to him towards the end of his life that contributed to the creation of the work that would be revised and revised and revised. But each of the translators, in this case, St. Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain and St. Theophan the Recluse, reworked the text so heavily and added so much more information. Both of these books are double the size of Scopoli's original, that they're not the same work. You could say they have the framework of the same work, but they're definitely not the same work. I think in many ways they changed even Scopoli's intents, obviously to reflect orthodoxy. Other Paul says good day. Good day. And so ultimately, it is. I can't take credit for it because ultimately this was written, as I mentioned. You can go to the link, this link right here. And now I'm wondering if it's actually going to all appear, because it looks like it broke it into two comments. The point is, if we can, let me see if I can get an original to work with, and or if I can find a better way to do this. Let me see here. If I take this out, because sometimes you can take out some of these functions in it, and it should still work. So give me just a moment. I'm going to see if that works. Oh, man. Come on. Okay, so I've got to find a way to make the link smaller so that it can be done, because this work by Hieromonk Thetis it's fantastic. It goes through all three of the Latin, the original, the Greek, and the Russian text, and goes with comparison tables even. The question is, how do I get this to you? I guess, I'll put the full link in the description after we're done, both on the show and when I make the cut. So you'll be able to go through it, and you can really see the difference, as well as have some of the best scholarship we have now on the life of Lorenzo Scupoli. And so I think I think it should help. And I hope that answers Jason's question as well as we could. But other than that, let me see here. As I mentioned, I'm going to stop the screen. And so, as I mentioned, as always, it is a live call-in. You can, everyone's free to make comments. We welcome your support, whether that's on YouTube or one of the other and many ways that you can support us on nftu.net, for example. Ultimately, it is a live call-in show. So if anyone wants to call in, feel free. Otherwise, it's no problem. I'm glad we could help, and hopefully we'll be able to package it even better, and so you get more of that information that you need. Anyone can call in, write in with a question, comments, etc. I did title this Hamas Attacks, and now I realize that my audio was probably terrible. We can check on the latest because there are literal live updates happening as we speak. So let me see here if we've had any updates on this topic, and we are going to put that back on the screen real quick. And then we are following the live comments from Breitbart, the live updates there. There were some issues with that grammar. I don't know why they would. Maybe they fixed it. Nope, they didn't fix it. Okay. 8:05 p.m. Speaking to Fox News, Israeli ambassador to the UN Gilad Erdan says the Hamas attack on Israel is our 9/11. Yeah, I got no comments on that. I don't. I just it's 9/11 is its own thing, and it was horrible. But I think to say this is our 9/11 might be, I hate to say this, but kind of an exaggeration, because there was a difference in the terms of the war. Yeah, exactly. That was my thinking, Paul. What a strange thing to say. Like these are very different events. And we're talking about levels of fortification that normally like would prevent this sort of thing. So what happened today is it's of historical interest and really should be. We're gonna see how it plays out, because ultimately Christians have a stake in the Holy Land as well. So we're gonna see what happens and how this goes. But yeah. It has been a huge event in terms of deaths. Over 300 dead, over 1,600 injured. And then on the Palestinian side, over 180 dead and I think it's also over 1,600 injured. So this is, it's really it's a big thing. But in any case, so no other updates really have popped up since. So I'm going to just stop sharing that. And again, I'm opening the floor. Oof. I'm not touching that one. And actually, I hate to say this, but there were, now that I think about it, because the first attacks were actually at a dance club. So while apparently they hit the Iron Dome with like 5,000 rockets, but then they started sending in shooters. And one of the places where people got shot up was a dance club. So ironically, there were dancing Israelis, and well, some of them aren't dancing anymore. Well, Mary, that's exactly the point. As we were mentioning earlier, beforehand, there's also something called the Heavenly Jerusalem Project going on, New Hazaria, sort of happening. So they definitely wanted to flatten the Al-Aqsa Mosque so they could build the temple. That's always been a long-term goal. However, globalists such as Kissinger, I mentioned this earlier, have noted that just on demographics, Israel will be off the map soon anyway. The reproduction rate among Palestinians is just higher than it is among Israelis. And so I figured this would be in like 10 years, that there would be this sort of conflict, but I never saw it coming now. But the Heavenly Jerusalem Project, which is funded by, I want to say Gordon Gekko, and I know that's not his name, it's like Igor Gekko or something. He basically, has been sponsoring the idea. This was a year and a half ago I saw this. But he'd been basically sponsoring for years the idea of creating a new Khazaria in what is now the disputed area that Russia and Ukraine are fighting over. Yeah, so I think if it's very possible that new Khazaria is actually an escape strategy or a plan B if things go badly in the Holy Land. Then the question becomes, ultimately, what do we do as Christians? And that's the thing. You can't take a side with, the Jews aren't being particularly kind in Israel to Christians, and the Muslims aren't being particularly kind in Israel to Christians. So maybe the best thing to do is in the chaos, just I say carve out a Christian protectorate with the holy sites, and just say this part's ours, and we'll defend it, and have it funded by an Orthodox country or something. No, that's kind of where I was going with it when I said I really didn't want to comment on this is our 9/11. I thought that was very poorly chosen. Vids of Israelis being captured and taken to Gaza was depressing. Divine judgment on Israel nonetheless. Yeah, that's the exact theory I've heard recently. I've been talking about it for about a year and a half, but obviously somebody's been reporting. I got that from that Christ Gnosis account on Twitter, but it's blown up ever since the war in Ukraine. It has blown up in size, and as I mentioned, the line from conspiracy theory to advertising is exactly 1 billionaire. So once you reach once you have somebody who's got a lot of money promoting what would sound like a crazy conspiracy theory, except that he's not crazy, he's eccentric because he's rich, then now you're talking about a plan that's basically actionable. Is it impossible for me to conceive that probably the most poorly executed war in history between both sides, whether by the Kremlin or by Zelensky, that's just leading to massive amounts of Russian death? It's terraforming. What they're basically doing is they're destroying the area, making it virtually uninhabitable for either side. Neither side wants to even fight this war anymore. It's unclear. And then magically, for certain high holy days and remembrances, you have a bunch of Israeli pilgrims heading to it, and we start seeing video of that. Like, is that an accident? I don't think so. I think that it's quite obvious what's happening. Yes, and Jason Allen agrees. Yeah, I'm telling you, it stops being a theory when you see that they're already doing the work to build it. And this may be that it could be that, frankly, Hamas, which I've read had to have been planning this for a long time, because it's really hard to get past Iron Dome. And somebody pointed out that guerrilla warfare is only effective if they have some people embedded in the Israeli government. So this is something else to consider. Hamas has Israeli spies. So it's gonna be different. We're gonna look at it though. Israelis and Zionists don't need the numbers in population because they have the support behind the scenes. Well, do they? I mean, I think that part of the reason that this is not working out the way we thought is because they don't really have the support behind the scenes. I think that that's a sea change in the way people are looking at this. I don't think I have a feeling that the largely muted response from the world community is opening a door that people weren't expecting to be opened. And I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Hold on one second. I'm just answering someone on Discord real quick. But anyway, basically, okay. So basically, ultimately, I think that this seems to me to be kind of an exit strategy. There will obviously not every Israeli is going to leave Israel, but I think a whole bunch of them are going to be moved for security reasons, etc., and relocated to a safe location that just happens to be the place that we've been blowing up for a while in Ukraine. So, unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles. If you don't have the access to the Temple Mount, you can't build a temple. You can't build a temple, your Antichrist can't come. So, I mean, ultimately, I hate to say this, and this is going to sound really rude of me and kind of tacky, but in the grand scheme of history, this is the closest that they got to even coming close to rebuilding a temple since AD 70, basically. And so chances are, a lot of things lined up great. There was the whole, first off, you had the Balfour Declaration, you had World War One, you had the communists destroy the Orthodox monarchy in Russia, you had communists all over Europe, all these agents, etc. And then World War II happened, basically because, we all know how World War II went. And finally, we have the present day and the rise of the internet. I don't think it's a coincidence that people are starting to question official narratives a lot more. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the best attempt so far didn't work out too well. Because ultimately, I'm not saying that Israel's going to lose. I'm not saying that. They might, though. I mean, they didn't see this coming, and that tells you, if your massive, super powerful anti-nuclear missile system that you've been, showing off for like 15 years is taken out by dudes with like rocket launchers in the desert, maybe your strategy isn't as well thought out as it could be. I'm just throwing that out there. So I don't know how this is going to ultimately how this is going to play out. I do think that we're going to see more. This is going to be interesting. Bloody and graphic, and there's horrifying images. You're absolutely right. People pointing out that it's gory. I would beg to offer that there has been lots and lots of gory images of Palestinian children as well. I am not saying that one side is better than the other or worse than the other. There's been lots of violence on both sides. You're right. You're right. Father Boniface caught me. What about the attempt to rebuild the temple under Julian the Apostate? That did happen. So that would mean that would be around. So this is the best chance they've had in 1400 years, not 1900. Let me see here. Radical Islam. I think that's becoming it's becoming more and more of a meme. It's like, I hate to say this, but there are radical Islamists for real, all over Africa and in Asia. They're even in the U.S. and in Europe. We know that, but I think that's what's happening is society is starting to realize that things aren't going normally. That when you start importing a whole bunch of people from Islamic countries or importing them from other countries, like I found interesting that there's a lot of imports to Western Europe from Romania. They're just not Christian; they're Muslim. And so, the point is, you just send a bunch of, Muslims over, and people are starting to wonder about things like demographic replacement, so on and so forth. With Israel, it's a foregone conclusion, however. See my comment before, Father Ronald, that was end of comment, my bad. Okay, hold on. Israelis and Zionists don't need numbers and population because they have the support behind the scenes. Radical Islam. Okay, I see what you're saying. Well, I mean, ultimately, I hate to say this, but Muslims and Jews have teamed up on Christians for a very long time. I mean, the takeover by the Umayyads of Hispania was basically a deal between Jews and Muslims. And this has happened many other times in history as well. So, in that sense, it's not that, Christians have a historical enemy. Oh, hey, we have a guest. Hold on. Welcome. Hey there, Paul.
Hey, Father Sweden, how you going?
It's going. Interesting choice of top. Glad you popped in. This is an interesting day today. We live in interesting times.
Verily. Sorry, my hair's going a little bit crazy. Depressing as well, as I mentioned, but
it's horribly violent. But
this is one of those issues. I was going to make a Twitter post about it, but then I kind of adopted the mindset that I'm really glad I'm seeing a lot of people online doing it as well, where it's like, yeah, you can care that it's an awful thing happening, but it's also like, I don't care because this is in Israel and I'm in America or I'm in Australia or whatever,
Right.
So I decided not to make it, but I was going to make a post about how this situation above all is an example of just how necessary non-linear value judgments are, and how most people can't do it, where you're either like, it's like, oh, look, it's like these evil Islamic Palestinians and Israel's got a right to defend herself and our greatest ally, etc. Or then you got the others who are like, oh, death to the great shaitan Israel, and the Hamas is going, they're fighting for freedom, whatever. It's like, no, both sides are literally satanic. Like, there's no way around it. I mean, you got Hamas, they're absolute barbarians, and from what I've seen a little bit, like obviously you can point out, oh, there's innocent people in Palestine and Israel. No doubt about that. But just from my brief,
a lot of them are called Christians.
And there's Christian Palestinians as well, so they're clearly a good exception to that. But apart from that, there is a lot of there is a barbarian horde in the Palestinian peoples, and they are motivated by a barbarian satanic religion. And then, of course, you look over to Israel itself, and that also is a barbarian horde. They're just in suits and they know how to talk well. And so you have countless accounts of how they have a silent persecution against Christians, kicking people out of their homes, spitting on Christians in public, desecrating churches and whatnot.
It's not even silent anymore. Now they're just doing it out and openly.
Exactly. Well, silent in the sense of like no media's picking up on it. Maybe they do know about it, and
there's a reason for that.
Exactly. Big noggin jogging there. So this really is just a case of like, look, both sides suck. And if we're talking specifically about Israel, this absolutely is a case of divine judgment, in my opinion. Tragic, absolutely. But then again, that doesn't make it not true, because there's divine judgment in, the real Israel of the Bible, the actual Israel, where God would judge the nation for its evils, and thousands of people who are non-combatants, quote unquote, to use modern terminology, were killed for it. But it was divine judgment.
I will say only God really knows the hearts of men. And so ultimately, when we're looking at that, I look at the destruction of Sodom, for example. I mean, God was willing to go all the way down to, if you find 10 good people, because he already knew you weren't going to. And so the point is that, but they still had to go through the experience. So not that I'm assigning culpability to non-combatants. I simply don't know.
Exactly. It's not a foregone conclusion just to think, oh, look, all non-combatants are just like happy-go-lucky, nice people and all that jazz.
Anna says both sides use Christians were useful idiots or tools to them. I would not be surprised. That's a very very accurate kind of take there. Father Boniface says Israel has a very high abortion rate. Yeah, it does, and that's part of the whole demographic destiny thing. Maybe if they weren't killing all their babies, they wouldn't be having this problem. But that's the reality of it. Well, they would have more. They'd have more combatants, and obviously Hamas has outplayed them there. So it's very. These are very unique times, and that's why we were kind of looking at that. But the question, and my view is, I don't know how you feel about this, but as you know, I know you're a high church Anglican. There are Anglican properties in the Holy Land as well, not just Roman Catholic ones, and Orthodox ones. But the point is, like, what about my idea would be, like, take the opportunity, if it starts getting pronounced, this battle between the two, to carve out a Christian protectorate. I think that would be something that I think everyone could get behind, and it solves a lot of problems.
Well, everyone who actually has an interest in preserving life, including for Christians, would get behind that. But I think we know some of the powers behind this aren't exactly for that. But that's an idea. I've always had my little fantasies of, like, oh, bring back the Kingdom of Jerusalem. That's like that's the real one state solution. Let's bring about that one.
I think we're living. One of the things that's amazing is that the times we're living in now are ones where people can kind of really push an idea forward. And just like you said, I didn't even realize that idea was common. I thought I had a very unique take, but the fact that it's not a unique take means it's within the realm of the possible. And if you had told me that, for example, the thing, even like the whole Elon Musk thing and how that's gone with, I would never have seen it. But I'm starting to realize we have kind of a role in shaping the future. And, I think the main difference is that I don't want to call them elites, because they're not. But the powers that be just knew that ahead of us. And so I don't know that they really do have that much power. because if they did, to me, as I put it, it looks to me like the entire 20th century is being reversed.
Yeah,
And that's
mate, on all fronts. It's because I think you saw my pretty spicy tweet that exploded recently.
I don't check Twitter that often, but I'll check it right now.
Okay. Well, I locked my account temporarily because of how much it kind of took off. But it was a recent one. It was like an essay length, small, like short.
Oh yeah,
small.
I think I did see this one. Yeah, what was it about again?
On historical revisionism in the faith. Basically,
Yeah,
just the bare basic proposition that it is not.
Oh yes, the one with the Nazis. Okay,
it is not sinful in principle for someone to question certain historical events from the time of a certain war.
I'll share it. I'll share it so you can read it out loud. Hold on.
Oh, by all means, thank you. Wait, do you want me to read it here or what?
Yeah, sure. Why not? It's your post. It's almost like
hey, sure.
like a spoken word or
sure.
What's that audio book? Yeah.
This is what I said. It is becoming manifest that dissent from the officially endorsed story of World War II is quickly gaining traction. This is something I greatly welcome, not for its own sake, since only the truth should be pursued for its own sake, wherever it lies, and I have not studied this topic enough to give conclusions, but for the sake of accomplishing something I have wanted to see happen for years now, and which I have sought to live out in my own life, a rupture of the cultural stranglehold over good faith historical disputation. To lay my cards on the table, my thesis, this is my thesis in sum, which I intend to turn into a video, to question mainstream accounts of Germany under the rule of Mustache Man, accounts of his actions before and during the war, including the big one, or even portrayals of Mustache Man himself and his inner circle, is not a sin. That is, questioning all those things in itself is not a sin. Why is it not a sin? Putting aside that I don't have any burden to prove something is not a sin, I can simply say that these are questions of post-revelatory history and are as such not tied to any article of faith or Christian living. Therefore, a completely orthodox Christian in good standing with the church and before God can freely dispute whether Germany really did order the systematic destruction of a people group if he has genuine doubts about the evidence provided for such, among other things. Now, what if there really is clear historical proof of a mainstream claim about Germany in World War II and someone continues to deny it? Is this sin? Yes, because, and to be clear, I'll make this clear a little bit later, when this proof is presented to that person, not that the proof exists out in the ether. That's to say that that's still is
right.
retarded. But yeah, anyway, yes, this is a sin because it is a denial of evident fact, which compromises the essential orientation of man towards truth. However, this would be no greater sin than someone who denies the moon landings in the face of clear proof of such. It isn't magically made worse by the orientation of post-war culture, and no one, to my knowledge, has called for the public cancellation and imprisonment of those who deny the moon landings or who deny that Jesus existed, a greater and truly inherent sin, since this touches on our God and Savior himself. But can there be further sinful motivations for denying demonstrable facts, such as an ungodly hatred for a certain people? Yes, and once again, this is no different for World War II history than it is for any other sober historical question. More importantly, however, the existence of clear proof for a proposition cannot simply be assumed, but is itself the very thing in question. And so to convict someone for denying a provable fact itself first requires discourse, since an ignorance of evidence does not make him a conscious denier of truth. Therefore, no clergy has the right to persecute any faithful under their care merely for expressing a dissenting historical opinion unrelated to faith. I pray that the open and public discourse of this issue and many others becomes a reality. But this will only happen if people are willing to take risks and openly discuss it themselves, which I have resolved before God to do for some years now, should anyone ask me my opinion on such a topic. We all must do the same if we hope for change. And that's my argument in sum. Perfectly sober, perfectly reasonable, but as we can probably all tell, something that is grounds for anathema in the court of the current progressive world. Like I can imagine the just the image of these big priests in garbs covered in rainbows and other signs, whatever, and they're just like, "We declare you anathema for denying this, the Earth Queen." And so that's basically what happened. A great number of people liked my tweet and shared it positively and commented on it positively, including some people saying, "Mate, Paul, you're being a little bit brave sticking your neck out here." But then also there were a bunch of haters who came on as well, both in comments and in quote tweets. No, not even just people who were like, understandably, like they're decent people, but they're understandably kind of trapped in the current cultural mindset, where they're just like, oh, Paul, I'm kind of concerned here. Is this kind of like code for something or whatever? There were some people like that, and I was happy to explain myself to them. But then there was others who were just like, I'm going to be straight up. They're either mentally handicapped or they are genuinely malicious agents. And there was definitely a mix of them in the haters, like the real haters who are like, oh, you Nazi sympathizer. This is dog whistle this, dog whistle that. And I resolved to basically spend the whole day after I posted this just responding to haters and not letting them flood the discourse and pressure me down. Like I was basically that there was that one battle in like Rome or whatever, or no, one in Scotland or something, where there was this one guy holding an entire army on a bridge, basically. And that was basically what I resolved to do for myself. Like every single one of my haters I responded to, and just soberly, where does this imply support for Nazism? Or how does anything you say here disprove any of my points? And just basically rubbishing all their arguments. And so
it was the hill to die on.
Yeah, exactly. It was a hill to die on. And some people actually use that exact words to me. Like, Paul, are you sure this is really a hill to die on? And I was like to them, yeah, actually it is. And the responses to my post prove that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. South Padre Shorty says, hi. Hello, Father. And American monarchists, we know Osama bin Laden was directly working with and training with the CIA. We do know that. He's also from the Saudi inner circles. We do know that. USA and British are close with the Saudis. We do know that. 9/11 at best was a coordinated self-sabotage. That is probably correct. We can go even further. Why were the bin Laden family that were in the U.S. immediately evacuated right after 9/11? Why? There's also we could ask a lot of questions. How did World Trade Center 7 go down? And how is it possible that it went down just 2 months after the developer, Larry Silverstein, signs a $3.5 billion insurance claim on it, even though no plane hit it and it was a block away and it looked like it actually imploded? Like, how's that happen?
I think the term there for you, Father Swaden, is that you're an anti-Semite.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been called all sorts of things, but I'm probably going to... I have a Gab account. So that's like automatically you're automatically an anti-Semite. That's it. It doesn't matter if you could fight Nazis all day on Gab, and there's actually groups devoted to this, but it doesn't matter. You're still there, so you're a bad person.
You must have a nice collection of Hugo Boss in your closet.
Yeah. Anyway, so the point is that I'm not even sure how that worked. What is Hugo Boss is a clothing thing, right?
That was because they supplied the clothes for the German government.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's why they look. Let's be real. That's why they were on point with the aesthetic.
Well, that the VW bug. The Volkswagens are always funny that way. I thought the funniest thing I saw was somebody I think it was some Twitter celebrity. I forget who this. They were a real celebrity on Twitter, and she got mad at Elon Musk, and so she's like, "I'm trading my Tesla for a Volkswagen, you Nazi," and and I'm sitting here like, one does not have much historical knowledge in this.
Oh my word, that is golden.
And I think it was Alyssa Milano, I think. But in any case, the point is it was the funniest thing I'd seen, and was one. It just wow, just
that is so funny.
Anyway, again, we're here live. If anyone wants to jump on, if you want to call, if you have questions, comments, etc., if you want to make a super chat, if you want to help the channel out because we can always use it, feel free. And you can also click into the chat box in blue there on top if you want to join in. So this has been a crazy day, Paul. This is this is wow. It's just I've never expected this.
Honestly, I'm wondring if anything, if the US the US will do anything, because obviously we have Biden. He came up and he's like, Israel has a right to defend itself, and it's like, okay, thanks, stunning and brave, but what's the US actually going to do? I wonder, because this isn't just like the usual. Hamas sent 3 rockets to Israel, and one of them hit a street side and injured a bus driver, or like, oh, Hamas terrorist shoots up outside the Alaska mosque or whatever. This is like an actual military invasion, basically.
Yeah.
So I wonder if the US is going to come to the help of the greatest ally in like a greater way than usual.
In the greatest ally who bombed.
Yeah. Well, probably actually,
Liberty.
I'll say that.
But
Probably
anyway.
probably second greatest ally after Ukraine.
Oh yes. Well, that's a big problem because we've got all that money going to Ukraine.
Oh yeah.
You know, we're like emptying the chambers, the financial chambers for this country by just throwing money at Ukraine. Well, now what do you do? Because you either have to stop sending money to Ukraine.
Yeah, you got like 2 crying babies and like 1 small bottle of milk. Who do you feed?
Well, I think that I hate to say this, but I think that the greater emphasis, just because the globalists knew about Israel's demographic implosion was already coming, is most likely that they're going to keep funding Ukraine because that's where all these people that are going to be displaced are going to move.
Yeah.
So you know that to me seems like it's just a Plan B setup.
Honestly, when I first heard that theory from another good podcast that I was listening to, and I'll be on them actually talking about Christian nationalism and how it was basically a thing for like the early church since Constantine, pretty much, and that all these Baptists going against, like, railing against Christian nationalism is like, mate, you guys wouldn't have your precious Council of Nicaea without it, okay? So just shut up. But any case, what they first introduced me when I was listening to them, the theory that the Ukraine war and it being a meat grinder is on purpose for, you know, basically Lebensraum for Israel. Kind of an ironic turn of events, but in any case, that's happening with that. And when my mate, one of my friends came over yesterday, we hung out, and he's been keeping really, really close tabs on the Ukraine war and numbers, whatever. And he told me within the first year or something. So not even to today, but like the first year, it's something like 30% of the Ukrainian population is either dead, injured, or out of the country within 1 year, which is absolutely bonkers, insane. And that the best estimates so far for casualties is total casualties for both sides is something like 70 or so thousand or 100,000 for Russia, and then like 300,000 plus for Ukraine, which, given that this is an offensive on Russia's part, and so typically like an offensive group should be taking high casualties, that's actually insane. And Ukraine's population is smaller, their military infrastructure is smaller, they're being cleaned up, basically. The
term I use is terraforming, because that's pretty much what they're doing.
Yeah, that's the scale.
As awful as it sounds. American Monarchist says, if we know the CIA and other international intelligence is working directly with radical Islam, we could hypothesize that intelligence are using radical Islam as a means to an end. As their own weapon, this could explain why the EU is flooding in immigrants to try to spark aggressive responses by Europeans against Islam. Then they could use this to rightly call concerned Europeans the new Nazis. I think that's hypothetical. That's an interesting hypothetical. I think that it's very possible. Personally, I'm at this point, the way I see it is that I don't know how it is in Australia and New Zealand, but in Europe, it's clearly it's a militarized invasion. There's no other way to put it.
For Australia, it's nowhere. Well, I wouldn't say nowhere near, but it's not to quite the same scale as Europe. But the difference with Australia is that, look, we have a natural sea border, like the greatest border you can ask, like the greatest wall you can ask for, basically. And so people can only come into the country, with the rare exception of like someone slipping in or whatever. But otherwise, en masse, people can a group en masse can only come into the country if our government goes out of its way to let them in. Whereas with the United States and the southern border and in Europe, you just basically have traitorous governments who, let's be real, they hate their people. Just let people walk in and then deal with them as they come in. With Australia, you have our government basically going out of their way to go to these people in the boats and then just like, hey, welcome, come on in, etc., etc. So it is different, but it is also largely the same. But I don't think it is. I don't think the import is to the same quite degree ratio-wise as Europe, but I could be wrong because we are a small country. But yeah, it is still the same situation where, look, our government is fundamentally constituted by traitors who hate the people, and they only have their own ulterior ends in mind. And that is why they import countless foreigners, at least into many of the city areas. Although, thankfully, it's good to have perspective that there are many areas in Australia that are still largely that are still greatly majority of the native European Anglo-Celtic stock of Australia. But my area in particular, in like Sydney and coastal New South Wales, much of it, well, not a lot of coastal New South Wales, but I guess kind of like somewhat inland Sydney and New South Wales, that is being absolutely flooded with foreigners. Because again, our government hates the native people. They don't give a crap about us. And they just want their economic power, they want their geopolitical power, and they want a voting bloc that they can easily sway. So that's basically what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of the school, and I'm going to probably be pilloried for this, but I'm more of the school that this is a real demographic replacement. I used to think it was about a voting block, etc. I don't think voting, at least in the United States, voting isn't even a real issue anymore. You know, we can talk all day long about whether the 2020 election was stolen. I have no doubt in my mind it was completely stolen and done in a way that was very open and brazen, which means there will never be a free election in the United States again. And if that's the case, then you would think, if that's the case, well, why would they need to send in more people? The only thing I can think is that it is some form of demographic replacement. Now, I'm not going to speculate on who would be pushing that from behind the scenes, but I would say that there is kind of a relation between today's events and you know, I mean, you know, if you have a large group of, you know, ethnically divided and religiously divided people that are slowly outnumbering you, then, you know, ironically, it would seem to me, I don't want to sound like it's chickens coming home to roost, but it kind of is. I mean, ultimately, the big problem is, what will Europe do? I mean, America isn't just they're all over the place. Basically, you know, my personal view is that what's happening in America is ultimately that governors are basically taking over in terms of power in the states. You know, Greg Abbott basically in Texas um, has been sending in his own forces and stuff like that to try to stop the border and, you know, border movements that are being facilitated by the federal government as well as all these NGOs.
Yeah.
New York's mayor, who was one of the, not only is he like, you know, he checks off all the boxes. He's black, he's gay, he's vegan. He forced veganism on little kids in the school lunches. They have to have like a vegan Mondays or something. But the point is, even him, he's a dyed-in-the-wool super liberal, is like, migrants go home. There's no more. New York is full. It's over. You have to go. That's it. Not like they care, and you know, they're just sending them up to New York anyway. But the whole point is that in the end, is this about the replacement of people? I part of me feels like to some degree it is.
I do agree with that, and I think that's why it's actually intertwined with the whole voting block thing. Because even though they can obviously manipulate elections, it's obviously great to have multiple layers of protection where you both have a block that is going to vote your way. Right. But then also, like, if things happen to not be looking so great your way, you have the facility to just fudge the numbers. So, like, you know, multiple layers, why not? But yeah, definitely the voting thing is like one aspect of it. In the end, yeah, I do think our leaders genuinely hate the underlying stock of our countries, its traditions, its religion. And so they want to see that destroyed and to create to really bring about the whole neoliberal line that I want to pull my head out over of like, oh, it's a melting pot of different peoples or whatever, such that you don't have a single united people with traditions and you can just easily micromanage, manipulate them and what have you for your own ends. And yeah, in that large respect, they do hate the European stock because that is the foundation of our countries. And then also seeing the US border invasion now, from what I've seen as well, there's also like, aren't there, I don't know if I might have misheard or something, but aren't there like even like people from like not even from Mexico, but they're coming up from the southern border?
Right. They're coming through from other areas. And this is going to shock you. A lot of, there's been hundreds of cases of Chinese nationals coming through. And
well,
so,
shocking, but also not.
yeah, and
But
so, but a lot of there were a lot of people coming from
mm,
Central America and El Salvador, which
yeah.
ironically, El Salvador is doing great now because the ones that don't escape, they just throw them into a supermax.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And so
Well, wow, what's this?
that
A government that actually cares for its people? Shock and horror.
yeah, I
In
know
South
it's
America.
amazing.
But
But
what's
oh,
oh yeah, you go ahead with that first.
yeah, Father Boniface asks, do you think the U.S. ever had a free election? The powers that be, even from the beginning, would never give up their power over some altruistic ideal. We were an oligarchy from the beginning. To a degree, I think that you're right. I mean, I believe that they at least up until the discarding of paper ballots, that there was at least kind of it was a rigged system, but it was a different kind of rigging. In other words, I still remember, and I always bring this up, Masonic Hall in New York, where one of my earliest jobs as a teenager as a telemarketer was in this building that was called Masonic Hall. And one of the things that it has is this gigantic, it's a gigantic painting, like a huge portrait of lots and lots of famous people who were Masons. And a whole lot of them were U.S. presidents. So if left guy on the Democrat side's a Mason and if right guy on the Republican side's a Mason, you're really still just voting for the Masons. So to that end, yeah, I think that even though now the fiction of paper ballots, etc., has that even though the reality has been discarded for the fiction of this online voting and rigged voting, I would say that the system was rigged in different ways, but it's become more and more direct and obvious.
Yep.
So that's
Yep. And so I was going to mention have you seen the Sicario movies?
I have not.
You haven't? Okay, they're very well. The second one's not as good, but it's still very good. But the first one's absolutely fantastic. They basically follow these guys. It's one of those movies it represents like a geopolitical warfare type situation. It's one of those very realistic and grounded ones. So it's not like spiced up for Hollywood, but it's like really good and realistic. And they're basically all about the U.S.-Mexico border and the stuff that happens there. But it mainly follows like private military contractors working with the United States. The second movie, though, is very prophetic with what's happening right now. The premise of that movie was that Islamic terrorists found their way to the southern to the border in Mexico, and they used the illegal migration channels to basically run into the United States, and they started terrorist attacks.
That actually does happen. So
yeah, through that channel. And so, well, I don't know much to be fair about what's happening right now or before, but and then from that, they basically said the United States government's declared war on the cartels, basically. So just like and then it ends with a pretty epic scene at the end. I won't spoil, but in any case, isn't that exactly what's about to happen now? Basically, with a million plus happening, plus.
Well, it's already happening. Father Boniface says the news media always vets out moral candidates. Very true. Washington is in the Masonic Temple next to City Hall in Philly. A picture hangs there. Very true. And I mean, we could just look at the apotheosis of Washington, where he's being elevated with his Masonic garb. But in any case, yeah, I think that we're seeing that happening in real time. And one of the reasons that I think that's important, and I think that they really do. I don't want to say that they really don't like the European heritage and culture, is because historical memory is a dangerous thing in the hands of free people. And what I mean by that is, once we get over the experiment that was democracy, we're like, okay, democracy, republicanism, this stuff didn't work. Well, then what's the next step is, well, then who takes power? And ultimately, I believe what we're in is an international power vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum. Eventually, the crown will return. I don't think it'll necessarily be the royal stock of, Harry and Meghan. But the point is, as I've mentioned many times in discussions on power, the difference between the crown placed on the head of a newly married couple and the crown of, say, the throne of the House of Mountbatten is about 700 years. So ultimately, it's anyone's game. It's just a question of who's going to make that jump. But Father Boniface notes, I've had Palestinians tell me that their mullahs are evil sellouts to the NWO. This would not surprise me because it's something that's not always talked about. And that is that even when we think of radical Islam, we have to remember radical Islam is still getting payments. They're getting money, and it's not all from loving families and stuff like that. They're in the NGO cycle as well. Think about China's treatment of the Uyghur Muslim people, which is ironically the treatment that Islam would do to other people as well. Basically enslave the husbands, take the wives, give them to Han Chinese. The point is that that's standard Islamic policy. They're just applying it backwards. But the point is, very few people actually hear about the Uyghurs, even in the Islamic world. And the reason why is because China's Belt and Road Initiative has invested billions of dollars, if not trillions, into the Middle East and into Islamic countries for infrastructure projects. It's a given they're not going to talk about Chinese abuse of Muslims because, frankly, they need that money. And so that's, unfortunately, that's something that's true with a lot of things, including, I hate to say this, but even in World Orthodoxy, that's a problem as well. It's a problem with,
Right.
even the point is money plays a role, and these NGOs know it.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for being on, Paul. I really appreciate it. I don't know if
No
you have any other comments or questions you want to shout out your channel.
Not particularly at the moment. I guess I'll just I'll catch you when I next catch you.
All right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow, so if you're around, so we'll see. You're always welcome. Thank you for being on, and you have a great rest of your it's your daytime. Okay. Bye now. Okay, that was great. It's always a pleasure to have the other Paul on for a visit and talking about timely topics like the situation going on in the Middle East right now. Let me take a look and see if we have any comments. I don't think we have any comments in the Discord. The last thing we were talking about is something that I do want to mention. Subdeacon Victorious Harrison's book has come out. Father Antonio says, thank you, Paul. And I'm going to just see if I can pull up the link to it. Give me just a moment. Okay. .com. True. Okay, there we go. Let me put this up on the screen. Apparently, as of yesterday, or as of today, I'm not sure, Subdeacon Victorious Harrison has released the book that we mentioned we were going to review, and I'm going to share it right now. The Russian Orthodox Church Abroad and the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece, A History. I'm not sure where Subdeacon Victorious is in his spiritual journey. I will say, however, and I do want to review this book as soon as we can, as soon as we can buy it. I do want to say that it's usually when somebody's about to make a very big change that they publish something like this. Clearly, it does refer to what happened with the new calendarists as uncanonical. And that's a big red flag in terms of the question of where is Subdeacon Victorious now. He may have joined a GOC is my guess. Give me just a moment. And so we'll talk more about that in a second. Can you talk about global Sergianism? I like to think that, and I've said this before, I like to think that the whole pandemic, the COVID thing, was a global Sergianism test. It was a question of which clergy would be willing to become weak simps for authoritarian atheistic governments, and I think we got a good taste of it, and we found out, that some people would be, and it wasn't just the Orthodox. Also, it occurred with Roman Catholics. It occurred with Protestants. Like ecumenism, Sergianism is not a heresy that's limited to Orthodoxy. It's a heresy that's limited to being an obedient simp for Satanists. So basically, if you are willing to do that, and I think that happened, unfortunately, we saw throughout the world, some people may have learned their lesson. And I think many people did. But there is still a very large contingent. And if I were to guess, I'd guess that 40 to 50% of the world population is still willing to go along to get along. And they will continue to just be obedient suckers for their government. So that's what I would say there. When I think of global surgeonism, that's what I'm referring to. It's surgeonism in practice. It's where you're willing to say your government's great, even if you've seen your fellow Christian shot in the face by, an arm of that government. It's kind of, that's, I don't want to say it's malevolent, but it does eventually become that way. Okay, so we're at 1 hour and 35 minutes so far. I really do appreciate it. If anyone can, as always, if you want to assist the channel, please let us, please do so. You can become a member. You can actually send super chats. And also, we want to hear, your comments, questions, and concerns. It's a live Q&A. We were glad to have Paul from the other Paul up here. And so if anyone has questions, comments, concerns, want to throw out a debate challenge at me, please do. I mean, that's fine. Let's just click on the link in blue at the top of the chat box. So yeah, there's a lot that we've talked about today. We have been seeing kind of the we're seeing things happening that are pretty much unprecedented in recent memory. And I think we're going to see a lot more changes as things go on. So, buckle up. It's going to be really, really interesting for the next few days. But getting back to the book here, let me see here if I can just read the thing. It says, in 1924, the Holy Orthodox Church was shaken when a small minority of Orthodox churches abandoned the traditional church calendar for the Gregorian calendar of the Roman Catholic and Protestant confessions. At the instigation of Patriarch Meletius Metaxakis of Constantinople, this single hierarch unilaterally and without the universal consensus of all the local Orthodox churches adopted the new calendar, intending to bring the Orthodox Church into closer union with the various heterodox confessions of the world. The cost of this innovation would be a great division among those in the Church of Greece who rejected this non-canonical act that would ultimately give rise to the Old Calendarist movement and to the genuine Orthodox Church of Greece. It's good for a blurb, but the Pan-Orthodox Synod was in 1923. I'm not sure when Constantinople may have adopted the new calendar I thought they adopted it in 1922 or 21, but they adopted it in 1924. That was the Church of Greece. But otherwise, this is it's a pretty bold opening. It's not wrong. And so basically, I am very curious to see what his ultimate conclusions are, or whether he's going to present it in a very partisan way. It is possible. I hate to say this, but most histories, when it comes to true orthodoxy, are to some degree partisan. It's human failings, even mine, because there's always that temptation to say my guy's the best guy, or my guy's the most right guy, so on and so forth. So I hope it's good, and if we can get the money to get that book, we will, and then we're going to review it live on the air, and we'll take a look and see if it's worth it. I think it should be. I'm confident. Subdeacon Nectarius, I don't know much about him, but he seems like a pretty smart guy. So frankly, I think that's a great. It's going to be a great read. But so a lot's been happening today, and as you know, things have gone kind of crazy in the Holy Land. So we'll see how that goes. I hope it goes according to God's glory, and we'll see if it does. But it's just, God's always got the ultimate last word. So let me see here. So was there anyone in the chat who had any questions, comments, or was there anyone who wanted to jump on and possibly, if you wanted to ask questions directly, we're right here. It's kind of what we do, and it's kind of what we've been kind of doing for a while, but mostly on Sundays. This is now a new thing because I mentioned last time, we had just recently been accepted into the YouTube Partner Program, so we're trying to build up on this and see if maybe this is going to be a kind of a future thing that we're going to try to build on missionary work. It's happening almost every week where I'm getting somebody thanking us for existing and having joined a true Orthodox church. It's quite amazing, and I've never really experienced anything like it. So I imagine it's got to be having an effect on people, and we'll keep seeing what happens and how things change over time. But our job here, as always, is to preach the gospel, but also to talk about the latest events. What synod am I part of? I am part of the Autonomous Orthodox Metropolia of North and South America and the British Isles, which it's usually called the Metropolia of the Americas, and it used to be part of what was known as the Milan Synod. I may have explained the kind of how the Milan Synod kind of fell apart, and we're kind of the remaining existing part of that. And we also have now, of course, parishes in the British Isles, which ironically is kind of like it's coming home. It's a homecoming in a sense, because our Western Rite people use what is an English recension of the Roman Rite. So that it's going back to England is actually quite natural, or going back to the British Isles, I should say, is quite natural, because that's where historically it came from. So yeah, and in any case, as I said, anyone has other questions, comments, concerns, this is what it's for. I'm thinking I'm probably going to try to see if we can go to 2 hours. And so we have about 19 minutes to go. I don't know if anyone is, if you're looking to have a discussion, or if you're looking to see, or if you're just curious and have a question, you can just post a comment in the chat, or you can also come on with the link in blue on the top. Or again, if you'd like to support the channel, please, we do appreciate it. And let me see here. I'm going to take just a quick moment to kind of make myself invisible, and that way, give myself a minute or two before I come back. So I'll be right back in 1 moment. Okay, I'm back. I just had to get up for a second here. I see. Is there any true Orthodox groups that recognize World Orthodox sacraments as valid, or do you all universally agree they're invalid? Well, again, that we didn't start that. The World Orthodox did by saying ours were invalid, but no, I think it's standard Orthodox theology. In this, people who say that we're schismatics, or when we say that other people are schismatics, that's standard Orthodox theology. There's no way around that. There was a point where what was known as a synod in resistance, and to some degree, even the Milan Synod held this position as well, of a kind of soft position where it was like one that the sacraments were potentially invalid or valid, which came from the position of Metropolitan Chrysostomus of Florina, one that he abandoned. It was a position he held, but then stopped by 1950. And so, not really, unfortunately. I mean, that's, again, when you're talking about the sacramental validity, you have to realize it comes back down to the bishop. It sounds horrifying to say that, for example, these 10 parishes in this city are not valid, but we do that with Roman Catholic churches all of the time. If the bishop is heretical, then all those parishes are gaining the power of the mystery from that heretical bishop. There's no way around that. And this is part of the reason why there are people who are like, well, I'm ROCOR only then. But then that's the choice. Okay, well, hold on. We have Father Boniface. Hello, Father. How are things going?
Good, good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. If they want, I'm going to take up that one on talking about Sergianism, global Sergianism.
Sure.
But I want to attack it from the American perspective, because you wouldn't call it Sergianism back at the time of the Civil War, but you would surely. But so, as being I'm a former Presbyterian minister, the Civil War, or the war between the states, was, I believe, a war between liberal Presbyterianism versus conservative Presbyterianism. And the North had adopted Unitarianism, which is really in line with the globalist thinking back at that time. It would only develop later. And so, therefore, one of the biggest things that split the North from the South, and which caused a split in the Presbyterian churches, was the Garden or Spring Resolution, which is where the Northern Presbyterian Church required the Southern Presbyterian Church to adopt the government policies of the elimination of slavery. And the South said, we can't do that because our states allow it. And if we participated in that, we would be looked at as seditious and traitors and be prosecuted by our own states. And so the church refused to follow that policy. And so the Southern Presbyterians were claiming to be conservative, and the Northern was liberal, okay? And so they were Unitarian, and so therefore bringing about actually the mixture in the Presbyterian world, they were more humanistic, okay? And so, and the PCUSA has now devolved into a Unitarian, Masonic, syncretistic, all religions are okay type of organization. And so if you look, then if we move forward to that, someone like President Woodrow Wilson, who was a Presbyterian, but Wilson was also called the American Bolshevik. And so you have here now the blending of American democratic style government moving into the globalist agenda through Wilson. And then, and so therefore, you can say that, the religious war of the Civil War was one of Unitarianism, future globalistic power, the one world government in its beginnings, which really has been beginning for a long, since history began, but you see its development in America. So you might as well call it Sergianism, because the American government was forcing the American people to believe in those humanistic principles, which they still do today, with their new ideas of freedom and liberty, which is basically liberty, fraternity, equality, the Statue of Liberty, which has incorporated French revolutionary ideas, which is the God of America over there in New York Harbor. And so, I just want to put in that 2 cents that, America is in effect, let's say, Sergian when its churches tout the government line. The thing about America is that it was never founded with a religious identity. And so you have the Protestants who come in and largely found the country, who also basically were fighting hierarchy from the very start. And so you can see the globalist blend of fighting hierarchy as it is today. And so, so you want to talk about Sergianism? Well, that's a little bit of the history of America, from its almost its inception, but especially as seen through the war between the states and the consolidation of America to become a nation state instead of a federal government. It became a nation state after the Civil War. So, just some of my 2 cents about the blending of and the whys of America's participation in the New World Order is that, democracy hates hierarchy. Even I think it was Madeleine Albright. It was recommended to her, why don't you check out this one king? She said, we don't do kings. We don't do kings. Well, that's right. and democracy hates hierarchy. And so therefore that's what's really, and I'll just backtrack a little bit. When you look at history, well, let's go to Henry VIII. They say liberty, liberty, liberty. Liberty is get rid of the Pope, right? Get rid of that hierarchy. And then it comes over to Britain. And then now liberty is get rid of Henry VIII or get rid of Charles I. And then the liberty type comes over to America, and then they say, we don't believe in any king. But what does it end up being? Masonic. And so anyway, so that's just a little bit of a perspective to blend in with the Orthodox viewpoint. That's all. That's my 2 cents.
Well, it's worth talking about, Father. While it doesn't relate directly to Sergionism, it definitely does relate to the current world order. It relates to modernism, and it relates to, unfortunately, kind of the unfortunate, the historical backdrop that a lot of people aren't aware of in terms of how ultimately the grounds of modernism, the grounds of Freemasonry, etc., are deeply embedded into the national collective psyche, whereas they weren't even in the pre-war period. In the post-war period, that has become hammered even more firmly, and then that combined with industrialization, etc., led ultimately to where we start talking about the destruction of the nuclear family, which is in itself hierarchy. So yeah, absolutely, I agree completely that there's a lot of soul searching, especially in America, that we need to do in terms of figuring out our own past and understanding where we're going. So yeah, I appreciated that insight, Father. So thank you. I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah. I don't think America had an identity from the start. I mean, if you look at Russia, they talk about the motherland, and really Russia's unity is based on its religion. But now you have throughout the world, I was shocked to find, I was looking at Bangladesh. It's not let's say a Muslim country anymore. It is a democracy. You see, even over in the Middle East, they're replacing these even Muslim, let's say, hierarchy and becoming a democracy. And so they're secularizing the world. Even Israel is a secular state. There's a small group of Orthodox and militant Jews, but it's largely a secular state. And so the secularism throughout the world is without authority, but it's funny how the authority is hidden. It's secret. Yeah. It's the deep state, because they don't want to show their faces, but it's the oligarchical, tremendously wealthy few that are running the whole system. And so eventually there's a void for where's God in all of it? There's a void throughout the world. Well, now, the Antichrist is going to come in and fill that void. But here in America, the void was from the very start. If you look at George Washington's speech to the elders of Rhode Island, it's like, hey, everybody, let's all get together and hug each other. America has freedom now of religion, but now it's a power grab by whatever religious powers that be to who's going to get the ascendancy. And so, so that's what America has been. And so, I mean, at the time of the Vietnam War, you had songs like, let's all look for America. We've all come to look for America, like Simon and Garfunkel and those guys. Yeah. Because America has no identity. Well, America is evolving. Oh, I see. It's this progressive, evolutionary search where we never find it, but we're always searching. So it's honorable to search okay, so democracy is great, right? Well, we've aborted over 60 million of our own, and our moral values, and of course, like you said, the family has been destroyed, which is by design, and so you have the destruction of moral values, which has been taking place through the history of America in a cultural way to destroy the values of the people with the advent of course, liberalistic and the news media to have a mounted attack to destroy the values whatever was left of Christianity has been systematically destroyed over the centuries. And in law, you have the redefinition of the word freedom and liberty, which has been going down incrementally through the history of America. I tutored a boy in high school. You get all this political baloney in the public school systems, but I managed to see all these speeches from Washington to Roosevelt, Truman, Johnson, Kennedy, and blah, blah, blah. And you can see the deliberate revamping of the definition of freedom to where it is now. And people say, well, let's get back to the Constitution. Well, the Constitution started the problem. Why do you want to go back there? You need to go back to faith in God. You need to look at the hierarchy. I'm talking, pie in the sky here, but that's where you need to get back to a godly leader. And they say, well, there was no such thing as a godly king. Yes, there was. And I was reading in the history of England where there was a time where the king feared God. He feared breaking the commandments of God. And where's that today? I'm ready to. Where's the fear of God in the city councils and in the counties and in the states and wherever? There is none. And they don't think that there's any consequences for their actions. They can do what they want without any consequences. Baloney, And so, hey, everybody listening, go visit your next city council meeting and give them a piece of your mind and preach the gospel.
Ultimately, it's gonna power is local. Ultimately, and so that's where people have to go. The simple reality is we can't do anything for in terms of the national or we have to deal with what we can deal with that we can control, and that is how we take back control, by dealing with what we can actually control.
Right.
Frank Canine asks, do the bishops have to be anathematized, or do once they become heretics, it just automatically becomes invalid? Well, they should be anathematized if they're heretics, but the simple reality is once you're embracing heresy and you're openly proclaiming it, you're a heretic and the grace of God leaves you. That's usually when your flock will leave you, and then eventually your synod will remove you. In cases where that doesn't happen, it's because it's not orthodox. It's something else. I hope that answers that question. Okay, and did we have any? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm good. Yeah, I'll sign off.
All right.
God bless
you, Father. Thank you, and have a great rest of your evening. Mm-hmm. Okay, and okay, and so if anyone else would like to come on, of course, you can always jump on with the blue link in blue at the top of the chat. Give me just a moment here, and if there are other questions, comments, concerns, etc., if you want to support what we're doing here, excuse me, and of course, once again, we're going to be going live tomorrow on Sunday, as we always do. Usually between 8 and 8:30, just depends on the schedule. But I've got a dog here that suddenly wants to pay attention to me. But in any case, so that's today was an interesting show. I want to thank everyone who did call and did comment, and I want to thank the other Paul. I want to thank Fr Boniface for taking the time out of their schedules to pop on. Anyone is always welcome to arrive at any time. And if they want to have a conversation, I want to thank everyone who was asking questions. I want to thank everyone who was making comments. You're kind of what makes this run alongside, with what we do here. It's never been just us doing lectures, etc. So then let me see here. It's always been kind of all of us together. It's a community, and it's still kind of new to me to figure that out, but I'm starting to understand it, and we'll keep doing what we're doing. In the end, the truth, it's about, proclaiming the truth to the world, and we're going to keep trying to do that as well as we can. So just to note real quick, one moment, just wanted to check one thing here. And so, let me see here. Okay. And as always, I'm just going to read a quick closing, and that is, since 2004, NFTU has been reporting on events related to true orthodoxy as well as underreported events relating to the greatest heresy of our age, ecumenism, a global web of interreligious syncretism in which the hierarchy of world orthodoxy is now inextricably enmeshed. When we began this page, we never thought we'd be in the middle of a global war for the salvation of souls, but things never work out the way that hold on. Have you thought about Subdeacon Nectario showing up on here? We've asked. I hadn't heard back. The only thing I've actually heard from him was when I said that we were going to review his book, and he sent me a link to it to purchase. But no, he hasn't actually asked or anything like that. And I did try. I think I tried to reach out to him on Twitter, but I never heard anything back. I don't think that I would assume he wouldn't mind. I don't know. I mean, I didn't ask, but yeah. I mean, if you know him, you could ask him and see if he'll come on. We'd be glad to have him. And so, just as I was saying, things never go out the way we plan, and I'm going full time to expose ecumenical heresy when it can be found, help Orthodox Christians find their way home, and do my part to stop the globalists from fulfilling their plans of one world religion, the religion of Antichrist. Today, we need your help. Subscribe and support us at nftu.net, on our Subscribe Star, on Odyssey, or here on YouTube. And keep watching because we're just getting started. We got another question. How do we as the church cut off from the Antichrist New World Order? That's a very complicated question. But it's actually, in some ways, it's pretty simple. In the first place, it's a given that, the church is central to our community. In the second place, it's a matter of decoupling yourself. We're seeing a lot of discussions about parallel societies, parallel economies. This kind of existed in Poland before the collapse of their own communist government. This has been shown in many cases, what you ultimately have to do is you have to build and create your own community, and stay away from the stuff that would lead to the Antichrist New World Order. I have heard of late that they plan to introduce cashless societies before 2024, or introduce them in the Western countries. Resist that. Everything they tell you that they're gonna do or want you to do the opposite. Especially when it comes to church, because they would prefer that they want to make atomized little consumers. That is their ultimate goal, because then you're just cogs in a machine that you have no control over. Walk away from it altogether. Everything from when it comes to eating, growing your own food. Like, there's things people can do, even in an apartment. But resist every attempt to try to shove you into that system. And that's the most that you really can do, because ultimately, they're not that powerful as it stands. Like, they are definitely an Antichrist. I don't see them as the Antichrist, but I definitely see them as an Antichrist. But they can be stuff. Hold on, I just received the message. Give me a moment. Hold on, just saw this. Okay. Just give me one moment. So yeah, as I was saying, make sure to fight at every turn. That's how it's got to be. And you use the weapons of the Spirit. You use prayer. You use the mysteries of the church. You use the life in the church as a center. And then from there, you move outward. I often mention localism. The truth of the matter is, I can identify within 20 miles where I can find locally grown fruits, vegetables, meats, businesses that carry them. In other words, these are things that are, how do I put this? They're resistant to supply chain disorder. There was a big time during the COVID pandemic where suddenly the supply chain went into chaos. Trucks weren't moving. There were fuel price issues. There were, ports closing issues. All of a sudden, I was like, this is such a joke. It's obvious what they were doing, and they were testing to see if they could completely destabilize the economy. They failed, but they liked people to think that they succeeded at something, but they in fact failed at it. So yeah, I would say that's the next big step. If they move to CBDCs, put as much as you can before that into cash, into crypto, into precious metals if you have it. But also, as I mentioned, it's not just about converting money; it's about making your money grow. Few people realize just how much of a return you get on a $35 apple tree you buy at Home Depot. Yes, Father Antonio says, add to that private transactions, cash, barter, and Monero. He's a very big Monero fan. The reason why he likes Monero so much, and a lot of people do, is because it's a very high security coin. Unlike Bitcoin, all of Bitcoin's transactions are public ledger. There's advantages and disadvantages to this, but one of the big disadvantages is privacy. And that's part of the reason why a lot of people like using Monero, because it is it's a stable code base, and more importantly, it's about user privacy. And so, definitely, thank you for that. Father Antonios, and I appreciate it. And yes, if you can, switch into crypto, switch into Monero. On NFT.net, we have Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Monero addresses. And so the point is, it's not as hard to use as it would have been 25 years ago. They have ATMs now for this stuff, but I'm not exactly a fan of having the ATM track my purchase, etc. So ultimately, you can do things. As I was mentioning, a $25 or $35 apple tree at okay, now that's interesting. Hold on. I get meat, dairy, eggs, maple syrup, coffee, etc. with Monero. I want to know how, because that's something that I have been trying to figure out. I can buy, like, I usually just do, like, I do crypto exchange. For the most part, I can go to like some restaurants. Like I can go to Chipotle and pay with and I can pay with Litecoin and stuff like that. But yeah, like I've seen like the gift card things, but those always seem to kind of, like, just as I'm about to buy it, the business closes down. So I'm like, and that drives me nuts. But yeah, there's still value in it, and it's still workable. It's workable for transacting currency. It's being used all over the world right now. I mean, a lot of countries are adopting further usage. And we're kind of in the dark ages, and I hate using that term because the dark ages weren't really dark, but compared to other countries which are taking the lead in cryptocurrency adoption, because unfortunately our fearless leaders are far more interested in making sure that we're dependent on things like the physical dollar and ultimately the CBDC that will replace it. These are all things that you can avoid, and if you know where to get your, as I mentioned, getting your local foods, growing your local foods, praying, every home defense. I mean, I hate to say this, but everything that Ron Paul talked about in terms of your personal life, you should probably do when it comes to, home defense and keeping your house safe. When it comes to preserving your wealth, when it comes to preserving the access to food, access to water. Do you have ways to preserve your power if necessary? Do you have ways to cook if necessary? I mean, start thinking, like, prepare for disaster scenarios, and you will come out far stronger when there's no disaster. Or if the disaster is slow in coming, you won't even feel it. That's a lot of people were affected and shaken by the COVID, pandemic, etc. Our family wasn't so much, And part of that is because it was just, frankly, fate that I started working from home a month before they started putting things into effect. I worked evenings, so we went out mostly at night. And outside of everyone wearing masks all the time, which drove me nuts. I was like, we weren't going to do that much longer, but you had to if you were working in these jobs. But the point is that we kind of skated through it. Also, realizing, hydroxychloroquine was just a weaker version of quinine. That allowed us to walk through a lot of this stuff. But the reality is that it was a practice run for a real disaster. At one point, there was a little bit of paranoia on this one, but at one point there was a heavy thunderstorm, and it actually took out our power. It took it out for about an hour. I was so angry and was convinced that this was like deliberate, because at this point I'd become convinced that a lot of what the government was doing was just deliberately hurting people, that I just drove to Harbor Freight and bought a generator, just out of just rage. And the point is that so I have this. We have the generator now. We have various power packs. We have ways to cook. Next thing I'm looking at is larger water storage and things like that. But every little step you take towards total independence from the system will preserve you as they try to make the New World Order happen. If you were to ask me 20 years ago, and I'm going to repost this, if you were to ask me 20 years ago how close we were to New World Order, I would have said it's around the corner. I believe now, actually, we're further. I believe that the people who are pushing hard for this, frankly, they are losing. And that's very recent they've started losing, but they're losing, and that's why they're getting more desperate. All the Stars Are Dead, Millennium House, JLH3 asks, is it possible for there to be a genuinely Orthodox-inspired fantasy series to be written similar to C.S. Lewis's Narnia, but fully Orthodox? What effect do you think art has on the conversion of a culture? That's a really good question. Is the use of magic by Orthodox Christians in fictional stories prohibited? That's okay. There's a lot of questions here. Basically, what I would say is this. I would say that there can be obviously fantasy series that fictional works that can be referenced. I mean, we're talking about fictional stories, so I think the question of the use of magic may be less relevant because it's obviously a fictional story. That said, I don't know that there isn't enough. I mean, there's a lot in Orthodox history, even if you're just getting inspired by reading the lives of the saints. There's a lot of miracles, supernatural, and more already present. In other words, if you can heal somebody who's severely injured through your prayers, do you need to cast a spell? The question becomes, is it a good vehicle? Some have argued that it is. I'm not sure. I thought the stories that were written by Dostoevsky, for example, were fantastic works of fiction, and they're monumental. But the point is, he didn't do the magic thing. He described fictional stories about an Orthodox life, and they themselves were interesting and had elements sometimes of the supernatural, etc. Now, granted, I realize Dostoevsky is a very high bar, but the point is that there were other Russian writers who did that, and there were other Orthodox writers who did stuff like that. So it's not that I don't think it's possible. I think it's possible that one could write something like what Narnia had, while reflecting a more Orthodox theology, but I wonder whether that would be more of a crutch than a real change, like a story that would be more. Let's see, how can I put this? A story that would be more. If if I could state this more clearly, that could actually bring more people in. Part of the reason why I don't want to say that that's because, I mean, I'm not going to make any comments about Protestantism, etc. when it comes to the Narnia series, which allow me to be clear, I have not read. I never, I think I saw one of the movies, but in any case, that's, I know it's weird. I didn't read that. A lot of people did, but I just never had the chance. So the question is, can it be used? Probably. It's fiction. Is it the best way? I would think, I don't know. I mean, I'd be more amazed by seeing the next Brothers Karamazov than I would by seeing an Orthodox version, say, of Narnia. And that's just my opinion. That goes as far as it can because it's an opinion, man. So that's I hope that answers that question. All right. Well, once again, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank those who have, those who have contributed, those who contributed questions, contributed donations, helped out. Somebody has, or I will say, somebody, Father has ordered the book for me, so we will be reviewing that very soon. So that'll be coming up. As to whether we're gonna get some Deacon Nectarios on, I don't know. I mean, I want to. I think I want to read the book first, because if it's not that good, then I'd feel really bad putting him on and being like, that just wouldn't be a good idea. So, the Reader John says, thank you, your blessing. May God bless you, Reader John, and God bless everyone in the chat, and help, pray for me as we go through what we're doing now, and hopefully bring more people to the church. Again, we'll be back tomorrow for the Sunday show, and everyone have a good night, and thank you for being here. Good night, all.